number 2. Because in case you tell the taxi driver, I want to get back to my ship, and you tell them William, usually they don't know where to go. And I guess you have noticed that they are in different docks. Some of them they are next to each other, some of them they are quite far away from each other. And as well, sometimes the ships are hidden, because there are sometimes 2, even sometimes 3 in a row. And that's why it's very important to remember your dock. Dock number 2, it's from just a few steps away from the huge bridge, next to the huge church. If you look to the right, you can see already the steeple of the Jubilee Church. And to the opposite, you can see some kind of a modern Vienna. So, in opposite to many American cities, it's strictly forbidden to build high-rises too close to the city center. And the dark building is the DC Tower, together with antenna 250 meters, compared to Dubai, compared to New York, compared to Hong Kong. Not so impressive, but for us it's quite a huge building. Yeah, and now they're building number 2 and number 3. And there's also some concrete buildings that you can see a little bit hidden. They belong to the United Nations. So there are 4 headquarters of the United Nations. New York, doubtless, is the most important one. Then there's Geneva. Vienna is the biggest one. And there's even a smaller one located in Evropi. Yeah, and if they're discussing about nuclear power, industrial development, the war against drugs, it's usually over here also a lot of summits because of the Ukraine crisis, Syria and so on. That's usually here in Vienna located, but they usually prefer the beautiful palaces which are located in the city center or hotels over there for their meetings. To the right you can see the Jubilee Church. Looks like a very old church from the Middle Ages. Compared to the buildings that we're later gonna see, not that old. Was erected for Francis Joseph, being 50 years in power. And you don't have to remember too much names, because I know on such a journey a lot of names, a lot of dates are dropped. But Francis Joseph, or like we call him Franz Joseph, he was a phenomenon. He ruled the country a little bit less than 68 years. So we have some British guests, Canadians, Australians. If the British are talking about the Victorian age, we're talking about the time of Francis Joseph, and more than a half century. I would say that's a pretty long time. They ruled at the same time. And during the time of Francis Joseph, also the Danube was regulated. So your ship is docked on the main branch. Maybe you've noticed it's a straight branch, and it's artificial, it's man-made. And the same engineers who built the Suez Canal were also engaged over here. So already in the 1800s, the British Empire was trusting in Austrian engineering and technologies, and that's something that we still export around the globe. So on your journey in Austria, I'm not sure if you're heading to the west or to the east. Are you heading to Budapest?
No, we're heading towards Pjesma.
Yeah, so especially in Austria, you're going to realize that there are going to be a lot of gateways, a lot of hydropower plants. And just the Danube of the water, which is hydropower plants, they provide roughly half of the, they provide roughly the whole electricity for all the households here in Austria. That's quite impressive. And some of these hydropower plants, they produce more electricity than, for example, Hoover Dam. Yeah, and if you live next to a modern hydropower plant, the chance is quite high that the turbines are made in Austria. So out of 5 Kaplan turbines, these are the most efficient turbines where you can move the blades. 4 are made in Austria for the world market. That's quite impressive. So if you go to Switzerland, if you go to Norway, if you go to Canada, the United States, even China, in Brazil, wherever you go, these hydropower plants, quite often they have our technologies over there. Yeah, so tourism is important for the country, but we don't really have resources in opposite to the United States or Saudi Arabia. We cannot compete with low wages. If you go just a few miles to the east, there's a different level of wages and so on, salaries. So we have to compete with high quality products at the world market. And the whole country has just 9 million inhabitants. It's quite small. And roughly a fifth of the population is concentrated here in its capital. So it's a little bit more than 2 million inhabitants. And if you count Greater Vienna, it's between a quarter and a third of the whole population is concentrated here in the city and around the city, in the metropolitan region. So compared to many Asian cities, compared to many American cities, I would say 2 million, that's not so impressive, but for a little country like Austria, it's quite a huge capital. And to the left you can see the Jubilee Church again. And it's built in the style of the Middle Ages because the Habsburgs, this was the ruling family for 640 years, they gained power in the Middle Ages and they ruled the country for 640 years. I would say that's a pretty long time. And also Francis Joseph was a member of this family. And especially in the late 1800s, they had this attitude, history is over. They summarized history also with also in an architectonical way, and also later we're going to see wonderful examples that testify this attitude of the 1800s, which was not just typical for here. Also if you go to other European cities, even in the United States, also they were imitating old styles in the 1800s. And now to the right we can see again the DC Tower, the strange shape. The local cities are the Danube waves. Architects, it's the broken diamond. Also close to your ship there is a needle-shaped tower. Have you noticed that? Yeah. Up there are 2 revolving restaurants. Beautiful view. But to be honest, not the best food. And till the 1960s there used to be a huge garbage deposit. And that's why they changed it. And they had a garden exhibit over there, and they built this needle. Typical architecture in the 1960s, they were quite fashionable. And it's not an antenna, we don't need antennas. If you look to the north from your ship, you realize that there are a lot of hills which are surrounding Vienna. It's really just a platform to have a great view. That's the purpose of this needle. And there's also a platform over there. And guess what you were able to do there before Corona started? Bungee jumping. But you had to pay in advance.
How bad.
The first who jumped, it's not a joke, that was the preacher of St. Stephen's Cathedral. He jumped and he blessed it. Later we're gonna see St. Stephen's. Tony Faber, you don't have to remember the name, but a lot of famous people in the German-speaking countries, they want to have their children baptized by him or their weddings by Tony Faber. There to the left, we can see again the Jubilee Church. It's used by the international community, so every Sunday they are offering services in English language. So this is not one of the old languages of the empire, but because there's this huge community, they gave the second biggest church to the international community. To the left there's a pavilion, a grayish pavilion, there's a bluish cube over there, and beneath there is there's the stop of the red line, Vorgartenstraße, that's the only stop of the red line which starts with a V. So we like Victory, we like Viking, we like William, we like Vienna, quite easy to remember, the only stop of the red line which starts with a V. So you won the red line. And I know, I've been told by Americans, if that's wrong then please interrupt me. I've been told that in some parts of the States it's like that. If you take the bus, you have done something wrong in your life. It's not like this here. So there are a lot of people with a BMW or Mercedes at home, but they prefer to use the public transport system because usually it's the fastest way to get from A to B. The city was not made for cars. And that's also, it's really fast. Just 5 minutes from St. Stephen's to get to the riverbank. So if you want to stay longer, that would be also an opportunity. Yeah, and to the left, we can see already a small part of the Prater. The Prater is a huge green area, roughly twice as big as Central Park. So it's even bigger than the Principality of Monaco. Maybe some of you know this little dukedom, which is located along the Mediterranean. If you look to the left, you can see also the landmark of the Prater. So I was talking before about Austrian engineering. Now I'm talking about British engineering. Yeah, so this is a wonderful example of British engineering. And it's like the Jubilee Church. It was erected in the late 1800s for Francis Joseph being 50 years in power. And there used to be a lot of Ferris wheels. Some of them were even bigger. For example, the one from the World Fair in Chicago. But all of the first generation were demolished. This is the only one that survived. And it's still operating. It's doubtless the oldest, maybe also the slowest of its kind. From there you have a great view. You can see the meadows of the Prater, the different branches of the Danube. You can see as well St. Stephen's and many other monumental buildings over here. Yeah, and we are here in the area of the Northern Railway Station. Today is a Saturday, so there's less traffic over here, but during the week a lot of people who live in the countryside, they work here in the city of Vienna. It used to look like a palace. It's a very beautiful architecture, but during World War II it was one of the strategical targets, and that's why also here in this area there is a lot of post-war architecture or some contemporary architecture. And we have also an excellent train system. So I don't like rankings so much, but I've read that only the Swiss use their public transport system more than the trains and so on. And a lot of the trains are developed here for the world market, and especially trams. If you look to the left, you can see a Porsche design tram. In this case Siemens. And also Bombardier, the trams, they are developed here for the world market. To the left, the column surrounded by greenish horses. Up there is one of our admirals. I'm not sure if you can see him very well, but it might sound strange to you, because nowadays Austria is a landlocked country. But a little bit more than 100 years ago we had access to the Adriatic Sea. So our harbors were located in today's Italy, Croatia and Slovenia. Yeah, and a huge navy. Globalization is nothing new. We were trading our goods around the globe. So even in the wild, wild west, even in Sydney and Shanghai, they had our coffee house chairs, our safes. The Rocky Mountains, that they crossed them with our technologies. This is nowadays part of the UNESCO World Heritage, the railway system over here, which is a little bit to the south of Vienna. It's also something that you wouldn't expect, that the railway system is part of the UNESCO World Heritage. So it's not just the city, it's not just the Schönbrunn Palace, also we have this railway system nearby. And also aviator technologies. Due to aviator technologies, guess who was number one before World War I started?
Austria.
I'm afraid I feel really to disappoint you now. Not the Germans. The French had the best aviators, but we were already number 2. And we had the first airline of the world, which was used for the postal system. It doesn't exist anymore. The oldest still existing one is the KLM, Dutch one. But there was a lot of pioneers, and Edrich, Lohner, Porsche. I guess you know Porsche is still one of the wealthiest Austrian families, big players in the car industries. And some of the engineers, they are nowadays worldwide known. But I guess many people don't know that their origins from Austria. And car industries are very important for us. We earn more per capita in the car industries than, for example, the Germans do. And it doesn't matter which car brand you ride, at least one part was made in Austria. Or developed here in Austria for the world market. And Porsche is quite famous, the car industries, but so Volkswagen and so on, Skoda, Seat, all this, and also a couple of new brands, Audi. But Magna is not that known, but they're also big players, and they're also providing a lot of the technologies for American brands. And there are a lot of well-paid jobs also in Northern America. It's an Austro-Canadian company, self-made billionaire Frank Stronach. I'm not sure. Maybe some of you know him. Yeah, to the left, that's the mouth of the Viennese River, where you see the bridge. Yeah, and we are riding here along the Danube Canal. Actually, it's more one of the former main branches of the Danube. The main branch changed over the centuries a couple of times. And also over there is the Urania building. Now there's an observatory. It was built for the people's education. And so many gonna cross the bridge. And this was the border between the civilized world and our ancestors, the barbarians, for centuries. I'm afraid where your ship is docked. Still the land of the barbarians, but now we are entering the civilized world. So, like the British, like the Central Europeans, like the Scandinavians, we share more or less the same mix of ancient tribes. So, mainly here, ancient German and Celtic tribes settled here in this area. And for centuries, this was the border. Much later, on the remnants of an ancient Roman military camp, modern Vienna developed. And in the Middle Ages, it became the residence of the German emperors, the Hungarian kings, Bohemian kings, and even for a short time, Spain was administrated from here. Do we have guests from Florida? Florida was more or less as long part of the Habsburg Empire than it's part of the United States. An ancient city, St. Augustine, the city of Northern America, that's also one of the Habsburg foundations. And already in the 1500s, they had an empire where the sun never set. And this was too much power in one hand, so they split up the empire, and the last time it was united was for a short time by the father of Maria Theresa, but then even our closest allies said that's too much power in one hand, and till 1918 it was, even though it was then less important in the 1800s, it was still Vienna was the capital of the second biggest empire of Europe, after Russia. And that's why Vienna was protected by a huge fortification system, which made no sense anymore in the 1800s. So Francis Joseph, who ordered to regulate the Danube, also ordered to demolish the fortification system. And to the left you can see the former Minister of War and Defense. And then to the opposite, to the right, we see a little square and a grayish building with very geometric. And you may say this building doesn't look so special, but this was contemporary design around 1900. To the left we were imitating old style. So like the Jubilee Church, imitating an old style Ferris wheel, modern engineering of those days, modern railway stations and so on. And this struggle was also going on to the left in this brick building. That's the Academy of Applied Arts, added to the Museum of Applied Arts, and it's the same kind of museum like the Queen Victoria and Albert Museum. And there, even though Gustav Klimt was one of their famous students, you won't see there his paintings, you can see his designs. You can see how design changed over the centuries. And there's also a very interesting focus also on the time around 1900. And especially around 1900, due to design, especially due to the architecture, Vienna was very progressive. And a lot of the ideas which were developed around 1900 in the 1920s and 30s crossed the Atlantic Ocean. So your Art Deco is more or less the successor of the Viennese kind of Art Nouveau. It's also very geometric, the material should serve, and these ideas which were developed here around 1900. Yeah, to the left you can see one of the side entrances to the city park, where you see the flowers. So like the British, we like parks and gardens. Yeah, that's also something that I can recommend you in case you have no afternoon program, in case you stay in town. Please also discover the parks and the gardens, especially at this time of the year. It's wonderful. All the leaves are changing their colors. To the opposite, we can see the one family houses of the past. And many of these families became rich in just 1 or 2 generations. These were the Warren Buffetts, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerbergs of those days, and they wanted to imitate the old aristocratic families, like for example Saxony-Coburg. If you look down to the right, you can see a palace with a lot of white columns up there. They're the coat of arms of Saxony-Coburg. I guess you know this family. The Windsors, they are a very important side branch of this family. If you look into the garden to the left, you can see a marble arch with a golden statue, that's Johann Strauss. As well to the left, the yellowish building, that's the Q Saloon. And they are also used to perform. And that's the music to this kind of architecture. All of these buildings here along the Ring Boulevard, they're not that old, they're just between 100 and 150 years old. But this should be a necklace for the old historical city center that we later gonna discover. And I would say nowadays, Viennese waltz, more fancy dance. But in the 1800s, I have to tell you, much too much touching, tango. So I'm not sure if you can dance Viennese waltz. So this was the dirty dancing of the 1800s. So our nobility, they wouldn't have danced it, but then later this fashion crossed the Atlantic Ocean, was in all over Europe, they were dancing Viennese waltz, and then also our nobility started to dance Viennese waltz. And as I told you, hundreds of one-family houses. These are palaces, which belonged usually to one family in the past. Nowadays, many of them, they are changed into exquisite hotels. The most exquisite hotel is, I would say, doubtless the Hotel Imperial. But in Peel Suite, I've already read different numbers. The last number that I've read was before Corona started, depending on how many side rooms are included, but 5,000 euros for one night in the Peel Suite.
Oh, wow.
But you get the butler who irons your newspaper. That your valuable shirts don't get dirty because of the ink. I would say that's a special service. And a lot of famous people used to stay there. A lot of kings, dukes, a lot of shahs, sheikhs, emperors. Also the Japanese emperor, the English queen, for example. Also American presidents were over there. Khrushchev and Kennedy had their famous meeting in the Hotel Imperial. And a few years ago the American president wanted to stay there, but he had bad luck because the Rolling Stones were in town. It was sold out, but thankfully there are also a lot of other wonderful hotels. Michael Jackson, you remember the scary moment with the baby?
Oh, yeah.
I'm afraid this was at this hotel straight ahead. We're soon gonna see this hotel. And he also composed the Earth song, but straight ahead, the white building straight ahead. We cannot see it now, all at the same time. But soon, if you look to the right, there you see the entrance of the Hotel Imperial. And here we are entering Schwarzenberg Square. He was the commander of the Battle of Nations. 600,000 men fought there. They managed to defeat Napoleon. So Napoleon is not a big topic in the United States, but this is roughly, if you count together, the 4 biggest battles of the American Civil War, and now you have the Battle of Nations. This is more than 200 years ago this took place. To the left you can see a jet spring, and behind it a Russian soldier with a golden shield and a golden helmet. Have you noticed him? So the Russians liberated us in 1945. But they stayed a little bit longer than we wanted them to stay. And for 10 years Vienna was a splitted city. Like Berlin. For 10 years Austria was a splitted country, but just for 10 years. And 10 years after the war we regained our independence. To the left at St. Charles, roughly 300 years old. Built in front of the city walls, now it's part of the city of Vienna. To the right, and I'm afraid there you have to turn around to see the main entrance of the reddish building. That's the Music Association, Musikverein, famous for its golden hall and the perfect acoustics. To the right as well, it's the Albertina Modern, a hotspot for contemporary art. And to the left, the 2 pavilions, they're part of our underground system. And in the center you see a white building with a greenish roof. That's the Technical University. They're very proud. This year one of their professors got the Nobel Prize. To the left, at roughly 11 o'clock, I know we won't see it all at the same time. There's a white building with a golden dome. So it's a little bit hidden behind a tree. We all gonna see it at a different time. So that's why I'm telling you now. And that's the Secession building. The Secessionist was in the 1800s a movement, but not a political movement, it was an art movement. wanted to split up from the old way of architecture, the old way of painting. And Gustav Klimt was one of their famous founders. And inside is the famous Beethoven frieze, but the most famous one is shown in the Belvedere Palace, the Kiss. So the white building with the golden dome. I know we just see a small part of it, but I think I should have mentioned it. Yeah, and it's not that big, but it's the most important building due to Art Nouveau here in Vienna. It's a steel construction, roof, windows, and with a lot of these ideas later skyscrapers were built, 20 to 30 years later. The people didn't like it so much in the beginning. It's located close to the market, the biggest market next to the city center, and some people called it the Golden Cabbage Head. Not the nicest way to describe the building, but nowadays the Viennese are very proud because the deep impact on the history of architecture. Vor 12 Tagen ist das recht vollkommen. Heute ist sehr angenehm zum Fahren. So now we are re-entering the Ring Boulevard. For a short moment you can see parts of the roof and the steeple of St. Stephen's if you look down the street a little bit to the right. And the huge building which is now close to us, that's the Opera House. We have just 2 million inhabitants but 3 opera houses, a lot of concert halls, a lot of theaters. It's a very important part of our identity. And the superstars of the opera world, they are performing there. And a lot of careers started here. During World War II, unfortunately, it was destroyed. Just the front part survived, 80 to 90% burned down, but reconstructed the same way. So it's part of our resurrection after the war. So you don't need an opera house to feed your children, but this was so important for the people. Yeah, and a few years ago, there were huge explosions around the opera house. There was a man at the roof. He jumped several times from the roof. Maybe you've seen it on television. Maybe in the cinema. So just kidding, it was Tom Cruise. He shot another Mission Impossible. I haven't seen the movie, but I've seen the stunts, and it was quite interesting because Tom Cruise did most of the stunts himself. I think that's also it's amazing. To the left, the reddish building, that's the Academy of Fine Arts. To the opposite, to the right, we can see already the former personal gardens of the imperial family. And for a short moment, we have the chance to look through the gate, and then we're gonna see Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Therefore, you have to look now to the right. Yeah, so I was just between 4 and 5 when he started composing. The first melodies, so far we know, dedicated to his sister. At the age of 6, he was then also performing for the imperial family, and after he performed for Maria Theresa, he ran over to the Empress, jumped onto her lap and gave the Empress a kiss, which was strictly against the rules of the court, against the protocol. Probably the court servants were not so amused, but I think Maria Theresa was really amused, and this was the start of a wonderful career. And as a young man, he decided to come here to Vienna. So most of the famous composers were not born here, but many of them died here in Vienna, and many of them left us an amazing treasury of music. To the left, that's the Museum of Fine Arts. The whole museum is mirrored to the opposite, the Museum of Natural Sciences. Both are crowned with the cupola. In the center, that's Maria Theresa. She was the mother of Europe of the 1700s. She was the one with the 16 children. 2 of her sons became emperors, 2 of her daughters later became queens. And behind her you can see parts of the stables, the Baroque stables. To the opposite, to right, it's the only left city gate that we later gonna cross. And at the moment they are preparing for the national holiday, which is the 26th of October, so you don't have to be afraid because of the soldiers and so on. Yeah, and as well the yellowish and greenish wing, that's still a part of the Hofburg. The Hofburg is the Imperial Palace. According to the Academy of Sciences, at least 3,000 rooms. And that's 4 to 5 times bigger than Buckingham Palace, so it's huge. And we're gonna explore a part of the Hofburg soon. And to the left, you can see a building with a lot of marble columns. In front of it, there's the goddess of wisdom, and she should lead the members of parliament. Not always sure if that works. And those old men are struggling with horses, and horses are also a symbol of liberty. They're also a symbol of emotions, and you should calm down if you enter this temple of wisdom, and also ancient Greek and Roman philosophers. And from outside another statement, a very modest architecture, but inside precious rooms. That's typical for these buildings here along the Ring Boulevard. And they recently renovated it for more than 400 million euros. You have to be very careful, it's like an old lady. You cannot change your window. You need for every detail, you need experts, otherwise you destroy it. And to the right, it's my favorite garden. It's already the end of the rose blossom, but the People's Garden, Volksgarten, that would be here to the right. Something that I can recommend you to do. And as well, for a short moment, if you look, we can see part of the Imperial Court Theatre. That's the. If you look now to the right, down the street, there are also statues up the roof. It's still one of the most important stages in the German-speaking countries. And the spires that you can see here to the right, this, which are a little bit hidden behind the trees, this is not a church. That's our city hall. And also the famous Christmas market, there in front of the city hall located. And this was doubtless the most expensive building which was erected here along the Ring Boulevard, the city hall. So they were imitating old styles. Now if you look to the left, ancient Greece. Because Greece is the cradle of democracy. And before World War I started, we used to be a monarchy with a constitution, a little bit comparable to the UK nowadays. And then late in the Middle Ages, Vienna became important, the residence of the emperors. And if you look now to the right, you can see, they said that's the perfect style for our city hall. Because in the Renaissance time, the huge achievements due to art and sciences. That's why they said that's the perfect style for our museums. Also Renaissance, opera developed. The theatre, a mix of Baroque and Renaissance elements, because also Baroque was important for the development of the theatre. I would say even the backside of the Parliament building looks nice. And as I told you, inside precious rooms, amazing chandeliers and so on. Also here's the Palace of Justice, look, protected by 2 lions. If you look to the left, where there are the coaches at the moment. And if you look to the left, up the roof of the Parliament building, then you see something golden up there. Have you noticed that? Guess what you can see there?
Oh, yeah.
These are chimneys. Have you ever seen such chimneys? What looks like gold, it is gold. But you won't get rich if you scratch it off. It's just a very thin surface. It's gold, covered with gold leaf, so it's quite a common question. Is this gold? Is this gold? Yes. Usually also the statues and so on, what we're gonna see, most of it is really gold, but it's always a very, very thin surface. So even though we have quite high gold price, at the moment the craftsman's work is much more expensive than the gold leaves themselves. Yeah, now we are circling around the Museum of Natural Sciences, and soon we get off, but just my group E, and my channel is 3636. So please make sure that it's well plugged in. You cannot hear me now, but soon after leaving the coach, we're gonna use that, and I'm walking and talking. That's important to know. So in case, thankfully I have one spare one, in case somebody has forgotten his or hers. Yeah, and something which is also very important to know, we don't want to be rude or impolite, but on our walking tour we won't count you. So I've never lost somebody, but there's always a first time. In case you want to join us later in front of St. Stephen's Cathedral, that's the center of the center, even tourists know how to get there. There's a pharmacy located. And over there gonna be the meeting point. Yeah, so, and my group is leaving there at 11:45. I won't wait, so if you're not around that and expect you want to stay longer, also there's a underground line where you can catch up, where you're probably faster than using the shuttle service. Yeah, and probably my colleague also gonna show you a meeting point, but you're gonna, the other group that there's no rush, you're gonna probably meet a little bit earlier. And our dear bus driver, the pickup point is not a drop-off point. It's very important to know. He's not allowed to enter the city, and we're gonna head towards the spot which is the closest to St. Stephen's, where he's allowed to stop. Yeah, but he cannot wait for us, otherwise he gets problems with the police. So quite often there are policemen around, which makes sense, because otherwise there would be a huge traffic jam over there. So it's not the fault of the bus driver, but he's not allowed to wait there too long. So again, my channel is 36. What's the other channel? 37 for Group L. Group E, 36. We are leaving now. The others, I kindly ask you to stay on the coach.
We can leave things on here, right?
And we're gonna take the same coach back to the ship, so in case you want to leave things on the coach, like for example, I guess we won't need umbrellas, it's wonderful weather, so in case you want to leave something like that, or also a backpack. Yeah, that would be possible. And now I would say we leave. And then we're gonna explore parts of the city. I want to say thank you to our dear bus driver. Did a great job. Always getting slowly at the right spots that you can see more. And now I would say we start our walking tour. Ja, danke schön.
Get this to 30 what? 36 was it?
You're dragging your speaker thing. coming,
believe
ladies.
me, Nancy.
No. Just
You're joining me for the leisure walk? Yeah.
I have two more for you.
Yes, leisure.
From a different
welcome.
All right. See you later.
Leisure one. Yes.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. That's us.
Yes, me too. Perfect.
Das, was ich bekomme.
Sehen wir mal im Klo.
Okay.
A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Bettina. I'll be looking after you. We are the leisurely group this morning. That means we are heading now to the bus stop, which will be the same one where Nihad will pick us up later on, if you decide to come back with us at lunchtime. It's your decision. You have some free time, and if it's nice in the coffee house, you might decide to stay a little longer, but it's up to you, ladies and gentlemen. And we're going to walk for around about 20 minutes, usually nice and slow. I'm gonna walk as slowly as required by the slowest guests. There's some benches on the way. I never know what kind of guests I have in the group, you know, new knees, new hips, or like me, old knees, old hips. So you let me know what you need, and we can, you know, we can adjust. On the right hand side again, the two museums purpose-built to house the collections of the Habsburg family. It took 10 years to build each of them, and the pieces of art and the buildings are now belonging to the Republic of Austria. So this is all our possession here in this country. Empress Maria Theresa here sitting on her throne, the only woman ruling the empire, even though she herself was never crowned empress. Her husband, Francis Stephen, he was the crowned emperor. It wasn't possible for a woman to be crowned empress. But her husband was a very busy man. He was looking after the money of the family, and outside his marriage he fathered about 30 to 40 children. So, you know, he didn't have time to look at the politics as well. So, his wife ended up ruling for 40 years. On the right hand side, behind the gate, the Heldenplatz, the Heroes Square. And this is where the Austrian military, the army, the air force, the fire brigades, the ambulance services are getting ready for one of our most important holidays, the 26th of October. On that day in 1955, the everlasting neutrality of this country was signed. So still today, Austria is a neutral country, and on that day, they show their equipment here. So we have some planes, sometimes helicopters, all the tanks and cars, etc. Great for kids as well. When my boys were young, we had to come with them every year, so they would climb on fire engines, etc. So also here on the left hand side you see the sign outside the Parliament, Tag der offenen Tür, the day of the open door, 26th of October, when they open the doors and you can go inside and visit the Houses of Parliament. And on the left hand side again, coming up, our City Hall. We'll see it from the front in a moment. A very large building because our mayor is at the same time the governor of the county of Vienna. We have 9 counties in this country, Salzburg in the north and the Tyrol in the west and Vienna in the east, just to mention a few of them. And on the right hand side, the Burgtheater, the Court Theater, and as Karl mentioned, one of the most important German speaking stages here on the right. And on the left, our City Hall. Built in the same architectural style as the city halls in Flanders, in Brussels and Bruges, because that's where the citizens started to have the same politics. So that's why our city hall is built in the same style. On the right hand side, the coffee house Landmann. Yeah. This is where Professor Sigmund Freud would have enjoyed his coffee most days in the morning. He would sit in a coffee house and listen to the Viennese chatting. And then he came up with psychoanalysis. You know where that comes from. Crazy people. Crazy people. We are. And then you only need to cross the road though here on the left hand side to the main building of the Viennese University, who was teaching here. Our university goes back to the year 1365. It is one of the oldest, but not the oldest. And this is only the main building. It's way too small to hold all the faculties. They're scattered all over the town. On the left-hand side, we are now seeing a church, devotive church. And that church will remind you of St. Stephen's Cathedral when we get to the cathedral. But St. Stephen's is an actual Romanesque and Gothic church. The one on the left, again, is a mere copy of the Gothic styles. So this church is only about 130 years old, which for us is baby young. We continue driving along the Ringstraße, this boulevard that was built once the old city fortifications had been torn down. Those fortifications had protected the city very well for over 500 years, especially against the attacks of the Ottoman Empire, the modern Turks. And the Ottoman Empire was very powerful and strong, and they kept pushing west for hundreds of years, trying to conquer the city of Vienna, which they even called the Golden Apple. In those days, Vienna, after all, was the capital of the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation. But the Ottomans never managed to conquer the city, also because of those huge walls that were standing here in the place of this street. On the right-hand side, the building with the red tiles on the outside, that is the former stock exchange. The offices of the stock exchange moved to other premises. Nowadays, you can rent office space in this building. Still today, as it was in the monarchy, it's very prestigious if you live or work along the Ringstraße, along this street. The former private homes, also here on the left-hand side, are now, remodeled into apartments and offices and shops on the ground floor, or even beautiful hotels. Also along this street, though, you see more modern buildings. Austria was, after all, part of the German Reich during the Second World War, and the Americans and the British bombed Vienna in 1945. They bombed infrastructure, railway stations, industry that Vienna never had a lot of, never heavy industry in or around the city. So about a third of the city was destroyed. That's where you see very bland 1950s architecture that was built quickly to provide living space to the people. On the right-hand side is one example of a beautiful hotel, the Hansen Kempinski. This is where Theophil Hansen lived. He was the architect of our Houses of Parliament that looks like a Greek temple. On the left-hand side, coming up, a red brick building here set back, that's a former barracks building, because there was a revolution in 1848 of the population against the emperor, and that was not too long after the French Revolution. So the emperors were very scared that the same thing might happen here in Austria, and after this revolution that was, not successful, so the emperor kept the upper hand. He had 4 of those barracks buildings built around the city center, around the city in those days, not to protect the population from invaders, but to protect himself against the population.
Smart guy.
Yes. Nowadays in that building, 2 of those barracks buildings still exist. The Viennese police force have some of their offices, and the Austrian military. Even though we are a neutral country, we do have an army, we also have an air force. And our young men are obliged to serve in the army once they turn 18 or finish school. They have to serve for 6 months in the army, or they can also choose the professional career in the army, of course, but they also have the choice nowadays to do a social service, but for 9 months. That's what my sons did. One worked in a hospital, the other one's for an ambulance service, and that younger son now studies medicine, so that was a great start. But my sons also have dual nationality, because their dad is British, and had they served in the Austrian army, even only for 6 months, the Brits would have taken away the British passport, and they wanted to hold on to both of them, nowadays. It's a smart decision to have the choice, and they have the right to hold both nationalities. On the left-hand side again, the Donau Canal, the Danube Canal, a side branch of the river Danube, as Karl already explained. The former main branch, until the new large branch was built, that now also protects the city from ever being flooded. So that works very well. We're very well protected here in the city of Vienna.
So Donau is German for Danube?
Yes, Donau is Danube. Yes, we speak German here. The name for the city Vienna in German is actually Wien, W-I-E-N, Wien, that's how we call our city. Very soon, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get off the bus to commence our little walking tour. You'll be able to hear me on channel 37. As mentioned, we're going to walk nice and easy to the Cathedral of St. Stephen's that you may want to visit inside. You find benches outside the cathedral, inside the cathedral. You find plenty of stores, you find coffee houses, pharmacies, hopefully whatever you may be looking for, chocolate shops, souvenir shops. And if you like, we're then going to meet again after the free time and take the same walk back again to the bus stop, and Nihad will pick us up here at 12 o'clock. That's the plan. So in case you want to meet us back at the bus stop, please be back here at 5 to 12. But I guess we are a small group, so let's talk outside. If we want to walk back together, or if you have your own plans, let me know and we discuss that outside. So here we are. Take your time getting off the bus, ladies and gentlemen, no rush, and I'll see you outside in a moment. Thank you. Vielen Dank. 12 Uhr. Dankeschön. Guten Morgen.
Grüß dich, servus.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, thank you.